Well, one of the big stories yesterday was, of course, the Supreme Court of Appeal overturning a High Court ruling that called for Deputy National Director of Public Prosecutions, Advocate Nomgcobo Jiba, and Special Director of Public Prosecutions, Mrwebi, to be struck off the roll of advocates. And they were struck off the roll in September 2016 after their decision to drop charges against former crime intelligence head Richard Mdluli, who was facing a number of charges that included defrauding a secret slush fund. Now, both Mrwebi and Jiba were put on special leave until the appeal judgment was finalised. So to talk to us more about this issue, we're joined now in studio by Nicole Fritz from Freedom Under Law, and she's the Executive Officer there. Welcome once again, Nicole. So firstly, as Freedom Under Law, just your reaction to that judgment and the fact that Jiba and Mrwebi will be returning to their positions at the NPA.
Right. I mean, we believe it is an unfortunate judgment. We believe that, this is an institution that has been roiled by instability. We believe it needs to be rebuilt, and that integrity needs to be restored, and it needs to be led by people who have a record of unimpeachable honesty, integrity, and reliability. And to the extent that this facilitates their return, we think it an unfortunate judgment. The case that we have brought, though, is continuing.
And whilst that is continuing, if one looks at the judgment there, the judgment also noted that one of the reasons that Jiba and Mrwebi was struck off the roll by the General Counsel of the Bar of South Africa was some incessant complaining from your organisation, Freedom Under Law.
So I'm not sure that it was incessant complaining, but Freedom Under Law had brought a case in respect of the withdrawal of charges against Mdluli, and they sought to have a review of the withdrawal. In fact, Freedom Under Law did succeed, and those charges were reinstated. And we believe that the conduct in respect to the court was very unhelpful, to put it mildly, and that was conceded. So yes, it isn't the only case, and as the minority judgment explains, there were several other matters which led to allowed for complaints in respect of Ms. Jiba's behaviour.
And looking at that case yesterday, previously President Jacob Zuma had indicated that he will not institute an inquiry awaiting the outcome of yesterday's proceedings, since Mrwebi and Jiba were granted leave to appeal. So right now, where do you stand with that? Will you be asking President Cyril Ramaphosa to institute an inquiry?
So what needs to be recalled is that to some extent this case has tracked alongside a case that has been brought by Freedom Under Law, which was seeking the review of the withdrawal of charges against Ms. Jiba by the current National Director of Public Prosecutions, Shaun Abrahams, and a review of the failure on the President's part to order such a disciplinary inquiry. He had been petitioned by Mr. Abrahams' predecessor, Mr. Nkosana, for over a year and had not responded. And we obtained those orders from our December High Court ruling that the withdrawal of the charges be set aside, and that the failure on the President's part to institute such an inquiry, a disciplinary inquiry, be set aside. They stayed the order that the President be ordered to establish such an inquiry. That stay essentially is now revived given yesterday's judgment. So there is an order that the President institute such a disciplinary proceedings. That matter, though, is on appeal, and so that order is essentially suspended until there is finalisation in respect of our case. But as it stands, there is a suspended order that the President establish a disciplinary inquiry in respect of Ms. Jiba and Mr. Mrwebi.
And when you were here last week, we left it at the point where you were saying that you would request your attorneys to prepare an application for court seeking a contempt of court orders against Shaun Abrahams and Jiba after she visited the NPA offices. So how far is that process?
So essentially there was an order that, pending finalisation in the GCB matter, that Ms. Jiba and Mr. Mrwebi be prohibited from visiting the National Prosecuting Authority's offices and performing their functions there. we are not, certain that that yesterday's matter brings things to finality. There may be an appeal that lies to the Constitutional Court, but that's for the GCB to make such an application. So we're seeking clarity on that. But what is unambiguous is that until yesterday's judgment, there was a very clear order that Ms. Jiba not attend the NPA's offices. And there was the acknowledgement on the part of Mr. Abrahams and Ms. Jiba that she had done so on 3 occasions prior to yesterday's judgment. We believe that was clearly in contempt of a court order that had application at that time. Given yesterday's judgment, there is now uncertainty as to whether that order still remains in force, but it certainly was in force before yesterday's hearing, and so that those contempt of court orders may still be obtained.
May still be obtained, but would you say that yesterday's judgment actually just complicates that matter slightly further? No,
the fact is that there was some consideration that we bring that on an urgent basis. That would not be brought on an urgent basis at this point in time, because there is uncertainty. It's not clear going forward that order still remains, and so the prospect of ongoing harm and prejudice would not be clearly established, is our feeling.
The other issue that I'd like your reaction on is whether you agree with the Supreme Court of Appeals yesterday that Mrwebi, notwithstanding his misconduct, did not actually gain anything personally from the withdrawal of charges against Mdluli.
Well, there was no monetary gain, and I don't think that's necessarily a sufficient answer to whether high-level officials have conducted themselves improperly. It may be that there was no personal gain, but that decisions taken were, in the interests of private parties, and that would still be improper. I think what has to be remembered is that yesterday's decision did find that there was such misconduct on Mr. Mrwebi's part that he was suspended for a 6-month period from being an advocate. So that there was such a finding. I think what also has to be recalled is that yesterday's majority decision, and it was a split decision, 3-2, 3 judges in the majority against 2 in the minority, but even the majority judgment found that even though Mr. Mrwebi and Ms. Jiba may have passed the bar in the sense of being advocates and not being struck from the role, their conduct might be such that it did not pass the bar such that they would be eligible to be officers of the National Prosecuting Authority. So the incompetence shown, and that was the word, might be such that would be sufficient to not have them meet the requirements for being fit and proper to be NPA officials.
And just finally, the whole Richard Mdluli saga, how much damage has that done to the office of the National Director of Public Prosecutions?
Well, I think, again, I spoke about the instability that has roiled the institution, that I think that there has been a severe impairment of public confidence in the National Prosecuting Authority, that there was a withdrawal of charges against Mr. Mdluli, that those have to be reinstated, that he is facing charges for fraud, for perjury, that he's also facing charges for murder, all of that. I mean, that it required NGOs to go to court in order to seek the reinstatement of those charges, I think means that there is reason to fear that the National Prosecuting Authority is not making prosecutorial decisions in a way that is free and fair, that does not entail prejudice, that is not being done in a way either to protect certain individuals or to unfairly target others. And until such confidence can be re-established, I think that there is going to be a lot of continued uncertainty.
Well, thank you so much, Nicole Fritz from Freedom Under Law, and this in the latest developments around what's happening at the NPA. We're going to go to a short break. When we come back, you'll have your latest news bulletin.